In 1965, Ford awarded the AFX Mustang drag car contract to Haldeman and Mooney in Charlotte, North Carolina, under project engineer John Wanderer. A prototype was built in Dearborn and then shipped to Haldeman and Mooney for inspection. Because of their many years of racing experience, they made additional changes and added needed features. The prototype was then shipped to the West Coast for testing. By the time the 10 cars arrived, Wanderer had less than a month before they were to run at the Pomona Winter Nationals in February 1965. The cars arrived without engines, transmissions, doors, hoods, front sheet metal, and all glass was missing except for the rear window. The first modification was removal of the front and rear suspensions. The rear axle was moved to a special welding jig, and the heavy-duty traction bars were installed and welded into place. Using these jigs made interchangeability of parts fast and easy in case of breakage or damage. The rear axle was moved 3 inches forward. The rear inner wheel well was removed and moved 3 inches forward too. The floorboards were altered for the special cross member that mounted the front of the traction bars. One leaf was removed from each leaf spring, and the stock rear housing was used with a 4.89 third member bolted in. The front spring towers were removed with an air chisel. The top part of the hole was filled with a sheet of metal, and the bottom was left open for underhood heat to escape. The mounting brackets for the upper A-arms were welded into position, and new motor mounts were fabricated and welded into place. The upper A-arm was modified to permit additional downward travel and were slightly shorter. The lower control arm was also modified for the new suspension system. A new spring setup replaced the stock coil setup. The spring was a flat 2-leaf affair that operated on the principle of a torsion bar. It attached to the lower control arm and extended to a bracket welded to the bottom of the front frame horn. The front end, hood, and doors were replaced with fiberglass components. The front fenders, grille, and front splash pan were molded in one piece to reduce weight. Also, lightweight plexiglass windows replaced the heavy glass units, all except the rear window. In the interior, a special lightweight fiberglass bucket seat was used. A roll bar was installed, and the rear seat was removed and replaced with carpeting. A tack was mounted on the dash. The engine was a 2-valve single overhead cam conversion of Ford's 427 cubic inch FEV8, nicknamed the Cammer. The heads were predominantly cast iron, but aluminum heads were later available. It used a roller cam drive with a 6-foot timing chain. The heads featured fully machined combustion chambers, stainless steel intake, and sodium-filled exhaust valves fitted with inner and outer springs, operated by shaft-mounted roller rockers. The lower end featured revised oiling and cross-bolted main bearing caps. The block's cam bore now featured a idler gear shaft that spun the distributor and oil pump. Early engines placed the spark plugs at the bottom of the head, and later engines had them mounted at the top. The stock engine with a single carburetor was rated at 616 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 515 pound-feet of torque at 3,800 RPM. A feat of engineering was made when the special headers were fabricated by Haldeman and Mooney. They used a 1-inch sectioned modified Galaxy radiator to keep everything cool. The battery was moved to the trunk over the right wheel well, and a special mount that got the spare tire up and to the rear of the trunk was installed. 10-inch M&H slicks were mounted to 6-inch wide American mags for the rear with 4-inch Americans on the front. The 427 was mounted to a rugged 4-speed transmission featuring a RC Industries cast nodular iron bell housing that also doubled as a scatter shield. The car was then ready to be sent to the paint shop. After paint and final trim assembly, the first 10 cars were ready to be shipped to the Ford drag teams.